The unification model of cosmic levels versus quantum mechanics. Orbital distribution within a gravito-magnetic framework. 1. Orbital distribution. Preamble. Within the framework of the model of unification, equality, and equivalence between cosmic levels, microcosm and macrocosm, all physical reality is understood as a coherent, hierarchical, and functionally unified structure. Every element, whether atomic or stellar, is composed of sub-elements governed by the same structural laws, geometric proportions, and dynamic principles. This includes the equivalence of radii, Ra, orbital distributions, Rn, densities, dA, and scaling coefficients such as the unification constant, Cu. In this context, the universe is not a fragmented or probabilistic construct, but a continuous and deterministic system structured through rotational and orbital dynamics, governed by the equilibrium between gravitational, centripetal, and magnetic, centrifugal-expansive, forces. This gravito-magnetic balance defines the stability, geometry, and functionality of all systems across cosmic scales. By contrast, quantum mechanics introduces a mathematical framework largely based on Cartesian coordinates and probabilistic interpretations, which, from the perspective of this model, represents a partial and observer-dependent abstraction rather than a faithful representation of cosmic structure. The following example illustrates this divergence, focusing on the distribution of orbitals. 1. Orbital distribution. Throughout history, observational evidence has consistently revealed that cosmic and stellar structures and systems are organized according to orbital and rotational dynamics. From the Moon's motion around the Earth's motion around the Sun, and the Sun's motion within its galaxy, to the internal structure of atoms, a common pattern emerges. All systems exhibit ordered, concentric configurations, sustained by rotationally stable dynamics through a balance of attractive centripetal, gravitational, and repulsive centrifugal, magnetic forces and fields, forces. This universal behavior is consistent with the fundamental relation of the model. Rn equals atomic radius, divided by pi power nn, which defines the hierarchical and quantized distribution of orbitals as a function of the atomic radius, Ra, and the orbital level, n. However, beginning in the 17th century, with the introduction of Cartesian coordinates by René Descartes, spatial representation became increasingly centered on orthogonal axes defined from a fixed observational point. While useful for measurement and local description, this framework does not reflect the intrinsic geometry of natural cosmic and stellar systems, which are fundamentally orbital rather than Cartesian. In modern quantum mechanics, this Cartesian paradigm persists in the mathematical description of atomic orbitals, often represented as probability distributions in coordinate space. From the standpoint of the unification model, such representations do not correspond to physically real orbital trajectories, but rather to abstract mathematical constructs detached from the dynamic principles governing natural systems. Specifically, the Cartesian description fails to incorporate the continuous rotational motion of the system, the gravito-magnetic coupling between nucleus and orbitals, the equilibrium between centripetal, gravitational, and centrifugal, magnetic expansive, forces, the structural proportionality observed across cosmic scales. In contrast, the unification model asserts that atomic orbitals are real, structured, and dynamically stable trajectories, analogous to planetary orbits, whose geometry and distribution are determined by the same universal principles. The atomic radius, Ra, derived as atomic radius equals sixth root of atomic weight divided by 2. And the density relation, atomic density equals p by the squared of atomic weight, provide a predictive and quantitative framework for determining orbital structure without recourse to probabilistic interpretations. Therefore, the Cartesian representation of orbitals in quantum mechanics constitutes, within this perspective, a conceptual limitation. It replaces the physically observable orbital reality of the cosmos with an abstract, observer-centered geometry. In conclusion, the distribution of orbitals, when interpreted through the unification model, is not a probabilistic cloud but a deterministic, rotational, and hierarchical structure. It reflects the same cosmic principles that govern all levels of reality, reinforcing the fundamental postulate of equivalence between microcosm and macrocosm. A severe critique of quantum mechanics. Although a severe critique of postulates contrary to our own may seem inappropriate, I sometimes believe it is fair and necessary to make such criticisms when opposing postulates, in order to impose their criteria, have unfairly and falsely undervalued, disqualified, and nullified those that preceded theirs, classical physics. For example, spin, which is a characteristic and direction resulting from the rotation of gravitational and magnetic fields, which promotes their alignment and mutual approach, is defined by QM with a negation, so that it is not what classical physics understood it to be. No, spin is not a rotation, but an intrinsic quantum number. Of course, if it were a rotation, then it had already been discovered, and so, a whole path of changes in names and physical qualities to rename them as quantum numbers. Well, for this critique, I present the accompanying diagram. Thanks friends, and check out my unification model if you're interested.